All right, what's up, my friends? Welcome back to the Full-Time Wedding Pro podcast. Today, it's not just me sitting alone in my little black painted studio. I have Sir Nathan Chanski on. Hello.
How's it going, man? I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Dude, same. I'm so happy you're here. So this is, if you guys don't know, I was just on his podcast. That was pretty great. I feel like I did fine. I don't
You were
know, maybe.
great. I loved it.
Yeah, and I knew like getting you on here, everybody would benefit from it. So I'm very, very excited for you just to interview you, ask some very tough questions. No, I'm playing. And yeah, just learn more about you, learn more about what you do for photographers and videographers in the wedding industry. So yeah, let's
I
do
love
it.
it.
Say
I love
hi
it.
virtually to Nathan, everybody. Let's go ahead. Let's start. So, dude, I'd love to just start with like learning more about you, just like telling your story, your journey of being a photographer, what led you to doing both photography and coaching now.
hmm
Yeah, just start there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I obviously everything started when when photography first caught my eye, which was probably when I was like 15 or 16. And um, that was when I was just kind of like playing around with the camera and I was like, oh, maybe we'll see what could come of this. Well, I didn't think at that time it could ever become a career because just like the circles I was in, that was never something that like you did. Like you went and you got a business degree, you worked at a corporate office and like that was your life. So I never
Mhm.
really entertained that deeply. It was just kind of like, oh, I like photography as a hobby. So then after that, because of that very limited belief, I went to college for 4 years, got that business degree, great times, 100K later. And then after that, I got a job initially in actually politics in
Wow.
Washington, D.C., working for like a political marketing agency. So we were working on accounts for like governors and senators and Congress people. And it was the 2016 election. Also a great time.
That's a
um,
wild start to a political
yeah.
career.
Yeah. And so at that point, I was like, I hate this. This is toxic. And like, it was so weird because I had these moments of opportunity in that time to like advance and take the next step in the corporate lifestyle, especially in that political sphere and like in this large metropolitan area. And I just came to this reckoning point where I was like, I don't want to do this and I don't want to work for somebody else. And I don't want to just have this job where you go to work every day and it's just like you sit in this office and you have this cap of what you can make in money and you can never like self-express to make money and it just felt so daunting to me and stifling. And so I was like, I would really love to be an entrepreneur in some way. And during this time, that was, I mean, I don't know exactly when Instagram started, but Instagram kind of really pushed the digital entrepreneur forward
Mhm.
around that time. And I noticed people, especially in the photography space back home, doing that. And I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing right now in this city and with this lifestyle, but I was like, I bet you I could do that. And I bet you I could make money doing that. And so then what I did was I moved back home, which was Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's like on the west side of the state. And I just got a job, which was like a very low stakes, low pressure job. And I was able to work there for like 35, 40 hours per week. And then on the side, I was able to build my photography business, which was like my goal. And so then after about like a year or two, I started making more in my photography than I made in that job, which wasn't like astronomically high, but I was like, okay, well, at least I know I can live off this. So I'm gonna go full time. And then I went full time. And it wasn't like a straight shot for me of like, and he lived happily ever after. It was definitely a time of I didn't know what I was doing, even though I had this like business degree. I definitely was floundering in business, which is so ironic,
Mhm.
and kind of goes to show you how much I was really taught. And so then during that time, especially when I got married, and this was like right at the beginning of 2020, and obviously the pandemic and all of that. Um, I mean, it was like this moment where, and I don't mean to like genderify this, but it was this moment of like, okay, you have a wife you need to provide for her. You know what I'm saying? And so, or even if I make it non-gender, it's just like I had a family to provide for.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, something has to like either you're going to go back into the corporate space or you need to figure out how to grow further as an entrepreneur. And so that's really what I felt like I needed to do. I was like, I need to grow further as an entrepreneur and I can do this. And so I really started, instead of just trying to go everything by myself and learn everything by myself by trial and error, which I had done before. There was a lot of pride wrapped up into that. I was like, I need to educate myself. I need to learn. I need to try new things. I need to step out of my comfort zone. And so that's what I did during that time, especially. And then that's when things really took off for me because I was actually like, I'd say the two biggest things for me was I was educating myself with people other than myself and investing in that education. And then I was also taking action on things, even when they felt very uncomfortable. And so that's when things really took off. And I think because I had such a rough start, I was able to relate to that person who kind of was sold this promise of like, just become an entrepreneur and you'll be able to make all this money. And so I really felt like I could speak to that person and be like, hey, I get it. You don't know how to make money, but you love your craft. And this is how I got there. And so then in 2022, which was like 2 years later, then I started actually coaching other people and helping people get to their first six figures, and now even like coach people like beyond their first six figures, which is really cool. So that's kind of how it all started for me. And yeah, I love it. I love what I do. So it's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I love that, man. So it's really interesting that you went from it's okay. So this is another funny part because like I know when we talked on the podcast, I was like, oh, we have a very similar story.
Hmm.
I didn't go into politics, but I did almost get a business degree.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because it was my parents were like, go to college, get a job, whatever. I was like,
Right.
no, but they
Same.
were like, I was young and I was still living at home. And they were like, okay, move out if you don't. I was like, okay, fine, I'll go.
Hmm.
And I went.
Wow. Good for you. You're way more gutsy than I was.
Yeah, I was like, fine. So I did go and I got I started with business, but then I switched because it was dumb, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I got a degree in audio production. But so
Interesting.
yeah, it's very interesting, and I've heard other stories from other people that I've worked with too, like in the photography sphere, like how they start with like the traditional route, and then they
Yeah.
realize it's not for them, and they go back towards the entrepreneur route,
Hmm.
or just not back, but just towards it, because they're
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I feel like there's a specific gene of people who are just like, I can't work a job,
Right.
and like we need to be in control.
Or even I even think it's interesting because I think sometimes it's like we start down this route of like this lie that we're sold that if you just get a degree and you just go this corporate route or this quote unquote safe route, then all your troubles will disappear and you'll have this job and this consistency to your life and all this. And then you get into it. I mean, this is what I experienced. I got into it and I was like, okay, the amount of time and effort and absolute garbage it takes from me to try to convince somebody else to give me a job was just this horrible experience for me. I was like, I hate this. And I was bad at it too. Like I was not a good interviewer. I was not a good like applier for a job person. And so I was like, if I'm going to do all this work and I'm going to fight this uphill battle, I may as well fight the uphill battle of doing my own thing instead of doing somebody else's thing. So that's the reckoning point I came to. I was like, y'all told me this was going to be easier and this is harder. So screw this. I'm doing it my way.
Yeah. So you mentioned that like during I know I read this on your website too, like during 2020 you had a lot of well, not a lot, it was crickets. Like it was very slow, which same for me. But I came from a realization where like I had a sales job and I was making a decent income.
Mm-hmm.
But I found myself way more happy working for myself, even though I was like broke and delivering like groceries through like DoorDash or food or whatever,
Yeah.
than I was at a cushy job. Did you feel the same?
Absolutely. I mean, it was definitely something where even though you feel a little bit defeated because you're just like, it's not working, you still have that hope of, I can wake up tomorrow and decide something for my life and make it happen, where when you work for somebody else, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just wake up and decide to make more money. You wake up and you do the work, and someone else decides how much you make and the cap in which you make it. And so it's like, to me, that's what the beauty of entrepreneurship was and still is that I can, like, I even think to myself all the time, like my wife and I talk about this all the time. I'm like, as an entrepreneur, the beauty of it is we could lose everything tomorrow and I still have me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean that pridefully, but it's like I still have the mind that God gave me and the skills and the talent and the experience. And like entrepreneurs can make money out of thin air
Yeah.
and just decide to make it whenever they want to. Whereas when you work for somebody else who calls those shots for you, you are at the will of what someone else decides for your income. And that to me is very, very limiting.
It is. Yeah, for sure. Do you and Kayla work together in the business?
Um, a little bit, like yes and no. Like Kayla's like my number one business coach, which is like,
Oh,
like in so many ways, just because I'm constantly bouncing things off her
yeah.
and I'm constantly asking her questions, and we are very different in many ways. She's a very logical thinker and I'm a very like emotional thinker. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've stretched each other. So now I've gotten a lot of like that logical side of myself and she's got a lot of that emotional side. And so we really bounce off each other a lot of ways in that sense. Um, does she have like a part of the business with me? Not necessarily. Well, she does. She is my bookkeeper. And that's
Oh, that's
because
nice.
I just don't trust anybody else with my finances at this point. That actually might be changing this year because we have a kid now and she's very busy. But
Yeah.
to be honest with you, like our goal since we were married, or my goal anyways, I knew she wanted to be a mom and I knew she wanted to be just more like in the house. And I was like, I don't like, I always wanted work to be optional for her. So,
Mm-hmm.
to me, I'm like, yeah, if she wants to work, great. If she doesn't want to work, great.
Yeah. No, I have this exact same mindset. And it's funny because like me and Caitlin, I'm the more logical one. She's the more emotional one. So
Yeah.
I'll like bounce ideas off of her and I'm like, okay, like this data here and like this probability this is going to work. And she was like, I don't know. How do you feel? I'm like, I don't know. I haven't thought
Yeah.
about that.
You're like, I
You know?
don't know. Don't ask me about my feelings.
Yeah. So it's a really fun dynamic. But so this is a question I was going to ask you later, but we're on the topic. So I figured I'd ask it now.
Mhm.
How do you, as somebody who owns really like two parts of a business or two businesses, however you have it set up, like how do you manage having a work-life balance, not only with a wife, but also now with a child?
Hmm. Well, I'm figuring it out. I
Yeah.
cannot at all say that I have it figured out. I think that it's very difficult in many senses, but it's also very simple in other senses. Um, I'm probably 3 to 4 months in to the wife and child
Hmm.
season, so I can't really say a whole lot there. But I think a lot of it comes down to like what's your priority and what's like the number one for you. And I think a lot of people just like to say, well, my family's number one, or the people in my life are number one. And I know for myself that's not always been true across the board. And I think especially this year I've really decided that to be true and like actually stuck to that. Whereas I think in past years there were times where I felt like and it wasn't like, oh, all the time I had these priorities mixed up. It was just, I think there were certain days or certain weeks where it was like, okay, I'm really prioritizing my business instead of my personal life. And again, in seasons, I think that's okay. But I think sometimes you have to be really careful about that, because it can get out of control really fast. And I mean, I understand like we want to build our businesses and all of that. And I'm such a big advocate for that. But I'm also like, you have to ask yourself for what? Because if you just build, and then you kind of come home at the end of the day and there's really nothing there, it's not like there's no one to share it with. There's no one to do it for. Like it's just kind of empty at the end of the day. So to me, I think it really does come down to you have to get those priorities correct and like which one's more important to you. Because like for me, um, like there have been product launches that I have forfeited this year. There have been like opportunities I forfeited this year. And kind of like I say no to so freaking many things. Like
Hmm.
people probably like multiple times a month will ask me to be at some workshop, and I say no to every single one of them because I'm like, I'm so sorry. I would love this. I do not have the capacity though, because then it's going to tax something else.
Yeah.
Or, even like when my wife had our child, like it was like the the morning after I had a wedding, and I could have shot it because like technically everything was done, but I had an associate shooter set up and everything. And I was like, should I shoot it? I don't know. And I asked my wife, and she was like, I mean, you can, it's totally fine. And then I could tell like there was something off. And so I was like, are you sure? Like, you don't seem like you're okay with this. And she's like, well, these are the first moments of our child's life. We'll never get back. Like, our family is going to be seeing her for the first time. And so in like a moment like that, I was like, okay, I'm not doing this. Like, I don't care about the advantage of doing it. It's just like, it's not worth it to me. I have to prioritize like family and the moments in our life. And I'm happy that I do it. So it just kind of depends on the person that's listening to this, like what your priorities are. Cause I'm not trying to push them on you, but you just have to kind of figure out what's most important. And that will kind of be your guiding compass, so to speak.
Yeah. I've strived for almost 5 years to find a really good work-life balance. But I don't know, for me, I've just boiled it down to like seasons, like you were talking about. Like I'll have
Totally.
seasons of imbalance where like
Mm-hmm.
it'll be full business focused, or like it'll
Yep.
be full family focused, or it'll be full fitness focused.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know, it's been tough for me. So I wanted to ask you that.
Yeah. I by no means have it all figured out. I'm figuring out as we go.
Yeah, but I feel special considering knowing that you say no to a lot of things. So thank you.
For sure. Oh yeah, no, not podcasts are pretty easy. Podcasts are like, hey, I'll hop in a podcast. I love it. But signing up for a workshop with travel, or
No, I
like
understand.
some of these collaborations, and just, oh geez, like some of it can just get a lot.
I understand for sure. So I want to switch gears and go back to like the beginning of your journey, because you talk a lot in your content about people not believing in you, and people telling you your art isn't going to pay the bills. And I got a lot of that, and I know a lot of people listening got a lot of that too.
Mm.
When did that really start for you, and how did that affect you in growing the initial stages of the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started back, like I told you, when I was like in that 15, 16 age,
Mm-hmm.
back when you're when people start talking to you about your career for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always told to me, like it's the narrative of the starving artist, right? And it's, you can't do this for long term. Like, I couldn't even, if I had $1 for every person who told me like, oh, like you're probably not going to want to be a photographer like long term, like maybe just for a year or two, because you'll definitely burn out. Like everybody that I know burns out. And it was like I started actually, or even a lot of people told me, they would say like, well, that's cool, but that's not like a big boy job. Like I think ultimately you'll want something that is more solid and more secure. And it's just crazy because it's just like people have these beliefs and then they push them on you. And what's actually kind of scary is I started saying them and adopting them myself
Mm-hmm.
until I actually started believing it. And what's actually kind of funny is like, I've like this past year I've made 7 figures, and people still say to me like, are you okay? It's just
Yeah.
funny how much people have this like mentality of entrepreneurship as a whole even is risky, but especially an artistic field of entrepreneurship
Mm-hmm.
or a digital field of entrepreneurship. It's just kind of like this mentality of like it's not enough, or it's not real, or it's not like adult. And yeah, I mean, I don't got anything to say to them other than like, okay, that's fine. I'm good if you are.
Yeah, no, that's a really good mindset to have, because I feel like a lot of people get burnt down, or they almost feel embarrassed about like posting and like
Totally.
being vulnerable on social. Did you ever feel any of that?
In what context specifically?
Like fear of being judged by family or
Oh, for
friends for
sure.
putting yourself out there?
100%. Absolutely. And that was what I think held me back for a while from even putting myself out there. And I think, I mean, I used to, prior to 2020, I was 100% like this elusive, mysterious, faceless account on Instagram, and you didn't really know who I was. I hid behind my photos, I hid behind my captions, and it's not like there's anything wrong with that, but it's just like I was 100% doing that because I was scared of what people thought of me, and I was
Mm-hmm.
scared that people would think, oh, who does this guy think he is? And I mean, this is ranging from people from high school, people from college, people in my own family, people who are my peers in the industry, people who are like local peers in the industry. Like just you name it. It was these certain people, and it was actually kind of funny because I got to the point where I started identifying there were actual faces and names of people that for whatever reason I was thinking of in these scenarios of like going to post something or going to create something. And I was like, this person is going to think this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember getting to this point where I just asked myself, and I'm like, okay, so you tiptoeing around that person, like John Smith or Jane Doe in your head, is that worth you sacrificing the things that you know that you're capable of? Or even like making it financial and being like, if you knew you could make XYZ in a certain year, or you knew you could get in this type of home or provide this type of lifestyle for your family. And the reason you were forfeiting it was because of, again, this John Smith or this Jane Doe in your life. Are you cool with that? And I was like, no, absolutely not. Like, this is the most ridiculous thing I am sacrificing my goals for. And so I was just like, okay, I don't care. Like, I can't care. I can't afford to care, to be honest with you.
Yep.
And so that's kind of how, like, I brute force got over it, because I was just like, I have to numb out to what quote unquote people think. And you just get over it. And what's funny too is I think people themselves like get over it too. Like they either unfollow you or they were never thinking those things in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. I had a very similar situation for me because like pre 2020, I was the same way. I would just post and like just some photos every now and then or some videos every now and then. And then when 2020 hit and all my weddings were rescheduled and I was like dead broke in a bad situation, I was like, I can't care. I just have
Totally.
to get out there and do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. It's like you can't afford it. Like I don't have the luxury of caring about what people think, the people that don't pay my bills. Like I'm
Exactly.
not. I mean, I don't know if you have that still. I still have that where I will go to share things online, and I'm like, okay, I know this person is watching this and is going to like think something of this, and I know this person is watching and is going to think something of this. Like I remember I posted something like a couple months ago on an Instagram story that was like bookended by probably like 10 other stories in like tiny little print that I had to hit seven figures this year. And I heard all about that from like certain people in my community, and just like the things that people had to say about that or whatever. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't care. I can't care. Like I'm not posting these things for them. Like this is my job. This is what I do. Like if you don't have to be in my audience if you don't want to be, you know what I'm saying? So you just kind of have to get really specific about who you do it for, who you're serving. And I think it can clarify a lot about a lot of the other junk.
Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations on hitting that income milestone, by the way.
Thanks, man.
This is the first year I'm doing that as well. So
Dude, so proud. That's amazing.
yeah, but I understand, like, I'll want to post some things that like I'm traveling or I'm doing things, but then I'm afraid of like my current audience judging me.
Yeah,
So yeah, I don't know. It's very,
100%. Totally
very
relate.
interesting mindset.
Yep.
But I want to go back to 2020 for a sec too, because you mentioned also on your website and some of your content, and now that you invested in some courses, mentors, coaching programs, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and that really changed the game for you. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, if you want to say who, go for it. But I'm really curious on what specifically helped you change about those
Mm-hmm.
programs, and what was like the breakthrough moment or the several breakthrough moments that you were like, okay, now I know what to do and I'm going to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the biggest things in 2020 specifically were probably not any sort of course. It was really the fact that I started reading books and I started, I mean, even like podcasts, I'd say. So books and podcasts, like anytime I had a free moment, I was just an absolute sponge for gleaning information to fill in this knowledge gap that I had. Because I was, and I'm humbled and not proud to say this, but before that time, I really had this mindset of like, and it's hard for me to go back and think like, what was I thinking? But it was something along the lines of like, I know everything that I need to know. And if I don't know something, I will just figure it out on my own. Right. And I think I also thought like, there's so many people out here who are just like scams and they're just trying to get my money and like, they don't actually know and da 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 da, which sometimes is true, but it wasn't always true. And I think once I started humbling myself and saying, you don't know, there are people out there who know a lot more than you and you can learn from them. And then not only that, but being like, okay, shut off your stupid pop music playlist, dude. Like listen to something that's going to help you in your life. Like you have all this free time with your ears, actually listen to something that's going to propel you forward in life. And so that's really what I'm trying to think of some of the books. I know, okay, I'll rattle some of the books that I know early on were very important to me. Psycho Cybernetics is a book by Maxwell Maltz, probably the single most like influential business book I've ever read.
That's
I guess
such
it's more
a
of a
niche
mindset
book too. So
I know.
It's very interesting that you said that.
Yeah. Well, I had a guy, I don't know if you know who Trey Cockram is.
Oh yeah.
But you do?
He had a sales guy named Jeremy. Jeremy's my coach right now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are they still working together?
No.
Okay.
But I know like him and like Brandon Forbes and like a couple of people in my program actually know Trey too.
Okay. Well, anyway, so Trey, it's really funny because I actually did a photo shoot with Trey and his fiance at the time.
Oh.
And then Trey, we just like hit it off immediately. And so then he was recommending me that book and then I read it and I was like, this is insane. And I know other books during that time were Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand was huge for me. I Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which there's a lot of stuff in there that I don't like fully agree with, but I mean, it was still, there was some stuff in there that I was like very changed by my mindset. Yeah. Atomic Habits, I was terribly unproductive and undisciplined, and that really helped me. E-Myth, I can't remember who E-Myth is by, but that just helped me understand like structure of a business and understanding like you are running a business. You're not just, fulfilling your passion. Trying to think of other things. Purple Cow by Seth Godin, I want to say, was an early one that I read that was really influential. Yeah, there was a couple in there that were just like so transformative for me. And I think How to Win Friends and Influence People is also huge. Just some of them were even like very old. You know what I'm saying? Like these, like this age old wisdom that I wasn't tapping into for so long. And then you read it and you're just like, duh, like why have I not listened to this? Why have I not read this before? And why aren't other people like reading this, And so I think I really got on that trip of like, if I can just learn and learn and learn, this will put me at an advantage. And then I also was someone who started taking action on what I learned, because you can't just learn, you have to actually take the action on the things. And so I think that was what really, really impacted me big time. Dan Henry, I don't know if you know who Dan Henry is.
Oh yeah.
He was really influential. I don't think he does a podcast anymore, but he did at the time. And I was like, I listened to like every single one of his podcasts. He just like screams at you and like makes fun of you on his show. And I love it.
Yeah. He was one of my early mentors.
Really?
Yeah. He's amazing. He's actually the reason I started a coaching program in the first place.
Really? So you know him very well.
Kind of. Yeah. I've only talked to him a few times, like personally, but
you know of him very well.
Oh yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. He's like, his mindset about like controversial marketing is, I really like to lean into that.
Interesting. Yeah, he does love His controversial marketing for sure.
Yeah, but no, I agree with you. His podcast was amazing, and I was so mad that he stopped it. I was
I know. I
like,
don't know why.
oh, what are you doing?
Yeah,
But no,
exactly.
it's amazing. And I want to like highlight something with everything that you're saying right now is like, I've never met an entrepreneur who is at six figures, multi six figures, 7, 8 figures, whatever, that isn't or doesn't have that trait of being a
Mhm.
sponge and letting go of your ego
Right.
and just like learning.
Yep. Being teachable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
It's
important.
huge. I think a lot of people think that once they get to a certain level that they don't need any more of that. Or I think a lot of people think that, I mean, even as a coach, when I started coaching, I kind of had this belief where I was like, wait, should I not tell people that I'm getting coaching and or do I not need coaching or whatever? And then it was ridiculous because I was like, dude, no, like you need to do that very thing that you tell other people to do, or else you're just kind of a fraud.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, in fact, it's funny because this year I have not had a coach specifically or any sort of, well, I did just hire a coach, but it's more of a financial coach.
Mhm.
But I haven't had like a business coach this year, and it's made me like so sad because I'm just like I need to find the person who I can look up to and fully glean all the information from. And so yeah, I think being coachable at any stage in your business is probably like one of the most important things you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you some names of some really great
Please
like
do.
coaches for
Absolutely.
coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeremy's one of them, but I'll shoot you that info after this. Because yeah, there's so many great guys,
Yeah.
and girls too. Like there's a lot of great people, but
Love it.
yeah, I love it. I love being in like the community of like a mastermind with a mentor.
Yeah.
At every stage of my life, I'll probably have that. So
Mm-hmm.
because it's just so amazing to
Mm-hmm.
have someone that's done what you're trying to do and you can ask
Right.
questions to and grow. It's invaluable.
Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
but of course we say that because we're coaches. So no, so I wanna shift gears to on your opinion on the current market, and then this will kind of lead us into like going deeper in on what you coach. But I was
Mm.
really curious because I have my own opinions on your opinions of why there are so many wedding creatives who have been struggling in the past 2 years specifically.
Mm. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that. I mean it's twofold. I've noticed a lot of creatives really struggling, but then I've also noticed, I mean, you probably have this too where like you're also very close to people who they're having the biggest years of their life
Yep.
and they're having the biggest months of their life and they're hitting goals that they never thought possible. They're hitting goals that like a couple years ago weren't possible really for the average photographer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you see that, and then you also see, yes, there are a lot of people who are struggling, and there are a lot of people who are vocally complaining about their struggles. And I think if I were to, because, yeah, I thought about this. If I were to chalk it up to a couple things, I think probably the number one thing, and this is just me being blatantly honest, is I think the person's expectation of what it takes to
Mm.
be a successful entrepreneur. Um, I think that the internet, like on social media, we have been sold this lie that digital entrepreneurship or making money online or whatever it is, like starting your own business is easy and it's quick and it doesn't have to take up a lot of your time. And like the reels of like the people just like walking off into the sunset and being like, I just took a dump and made 100K while I was on the toilet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous. And so I think what's really hard about that is a lot of naive people will believe that kind of stuff and then they will get into something thinking that they only have to do the bare minimum to make money. And so then they quit their otherwise stable jobs for this entrepreneurship lifestyle, which someone told them was easy and cheap. And like for photographers specifically, it's like you just buy that that camera and you get those presets, and I don't know, like $3,000 later, you just made 100,000 for your year. Like, go you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, that is such a lie. Like, that's not true. Like, I don't see anybody doing that. Like, that's never been the reality for an entrepreneur. And I just did a YouTube on this, and I was talking about the fact that, like, you see people on Shark Tank, because my wife and I watch Shark Tank like every Monday. And you see these people on Shark Tank, and they get on there, and the investors will be like, okay, so, what have you done personally for this business that you set up? And people are like, I sold my house for this, or I drained my savings and my 401k for this. We're all in, or I've been doing this for the past like 5 years and I'm still only, whatever, making 300k a year or something like that. And it's just crazy to me how then I see this internet marketing culture or this internet digital entrepreneurship culture, and it's kind of like you do the bare minimum and you expect the maximum. And I think that's probably, if I were to guess, I think that's probably the number one thing, because I do think your mindset is probably the most important factor when it comes to your level of success that you're able to reach. I think also, and this goes right in tandem with what I was just saying, I think it's there's a level where if you tell enough people that they should quit their job and create an Instagram account so they can make their millions, they will do it. And so I think a lot of people have started doing that, and you see a place like Instagram is very overpopulated right now in many senses. Like, I don't know, Peyton, if you, I don't know if you see all the posts out there that are like, the Instagram algorithm this and the Instagram algorithm that, and like where stuff never gets shown.
Oh yeah.
And like, I don't know what your philosophy is on that, but I'm like, guys, there's a lot of people trying to do the same thing on one platform. Like, everyone is competing for eyeballs. Like, you shouldn't be so surprised that you have to compete with however many more people than you did back in 2018. Like, that's just, like, we've been telling people to make their online business for how long, and they're doing it now. And so there is naturally more competition for attention these days. And so I think if I were to guess, it's those two things. It's people have very, very high expectations for low input. And then it's also just because of that, a lot of people jump in because they think it's a low barrier to entry. And so you kind of have this like high saturation as well. And so it kind of creates this perfect storm where, hey, like, if you're not doing the work at a really high volume and at a really quality level, you probably aren't going to see fireworks in your business in 2024. And that's just the reality. You really have to play a different game.
Yeah. I want to dive in on that, but I also do want to say your point on when people are like, the Instagram algorithm hates me and all this stuff. I have a very radical stance on that. And it's just that you're not making content that people want to consume.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because in my program, like, obviously we run ads is like our core, like that's the core thing I teach. And a lot of my members are testing 50 to 100 ads at a time, different combinations. So it's instant results because they're putting money behind it so they can see what their specific audience likes to consume.
Yeah.
And the problem with, like, we have those results fast because we're testing a lot.
Yep.
But most people, and I do want to get your opinion on this, I feel like most people just aren't making enough content.
Correct.
Or they're not studying what content does very well.
Correct. It's not a high enough volume.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm like, hey, when I grew from my stagnant 1,400 followers to where I'm at now, which is over 100,000, like, during that time period, I was putting out a new piece of content roughly like 6 times per week, and sometimes 7, and, Instagram story with my face every single day, pretty much. And people hear that and they're like, wow, like, that's like so much work and so much whatever. And I'm like, well, it's not only that you have to put it in because, just more exposure gives you more chances, but I think it's also the fact that you don't know what your audience wants to see from you unless you have the data to work with to prove that like a certain type of content works better than another. And if you're only posting like once every week, then you have to do a lot of weeks instead of a lot of days. Like if you're measuring by the metric of weeks, it's going to go so much slower than if you just measure by days, because you have to figure out what people want to see from you, to your point. And I think that that volume aspect is something that a lot of people don't want to do it. And it's like, okay, then you forfeit a lot of the advantage you could have.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to ask you about your personal results with Instagram, because like you went from 1,400 followers, now you're at 125.
Yeah.
How so? Do you feel? Because I think you mentioned this on the last podcast we did, or maybe you told me in person. I'm not exactly sure,
Uh-huh.
but you said that something along the lines of sometimes having a lot of followers can be a little bit of a disadvantage.
Mm.
So my question to you is like, because I'm working right now to grow a larger social media following.
Mm.
Because I feel like my lower followers is a disadvantage to me because people have less trust in me, even though we
Mm.
have great student results. So I'm curious on like you growing your Instagram to the level that it's at.
Mm-hmm.
How has that impacted the business results, the trust factor that you get, and overall, is it a positive or are there some downsides to it?
Both.
Okay.
I think that it's it's very positive in the sense that, I mean, obviously more eyeballs means more opportunities to impact people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And more opportunities to sell to people and more opportunities to teach people. And that's amazing. And I also think too there is some sort of, I guess, like subconscious bias to seeing somebody with a higher following count and assuming a level of authority or expertise because of that number. And I don't mean to downplay that because I think that definitely is there,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. But I also think that there is a potential downside in the sense that sometimes when you're at such a level, people can assume that you've always been at that level
Mm.
and that you have no idea what it's like to be at their level, which is funny because I'm like, I've had like 1,000-ish followers for I think longer than I've had over 100,000 followers. So people don't realize that because they think, oh, you've just always been at this point, or it just happened like overnight for you. And even getting to where I'm at now, it's like the amount of time that took was years. And the amount of time it took to just break that like initial number that I had was probably a year, I want to
Yeah.
say, maybe 6 months, but it was not like, oh, he started posting in a different way and then within a month he shot up to 10K. Like, no, that's not what happened. And so I think a lot of times they can lose a little bit of relatability with you because they're like, well, you've always been at that level. I think another maybe downside is that, or not a downside, but let me put it in a way of like, if I were you, how I might do things differently. Um, People think that the more attention they have and more eyeballs they have, always in terms of their following count, the better. I don't actually think that's always the case because your following count is like, it's like real estate basically, or I guess in some ways, I feel like I can't come up with a perfect metaphor for this, but basically, obviously, we know that when you post something, the algorithm shoots that post out to a pool one of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that pool one of people are there for a reason that has nothing to do with your core products, your core value, your core message, and they were just there because they followed you from some viral reel that had nothing to do with your core stuff, your niche, then it's like you're screwed because they're going to just swipe past it. They're like, I'm not here for this. And then the other people out there in your audience who they are there for your core information, they never get to see it. So it's kind of like you want your audience as dense, in my opinion, with people who want to be there for your main stuff. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I know for me, like if I would say I don't have a whole lot of things that as I grew my audience, I quote unquote did wrong. But if I did do something that I would say is like, I might tweak that. I feel like I grew a lot with a vehicle of entertainment,
Mhm.
and a lot of people signed up to follow me, I think because of my entertaining reels.
Yeah, they're funny.
And what?
They said they're very funny.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I appreciate that. But like, I think what I had to realize, especially this year, is like having people, follow me for the entertainment aspect is fine, but I don't want that to be like the core reason why they follow me, if that
Mhm.
makes any sense.
Yeah.
And even now, like I don't really make those entertaining reels very often. I'll throw in one every once in a while if I like have a funny idea, but I don't really strategize those very much anymore. I'm like, if they ever come up, I'll make one. Um, is this make any sense? Is this making
Yes.
any sense? Basically, what I'm saying is like, I think if I were to have, like, I have 125, right? And I think that's great. I think that's awesome. But to be honest with you, if I had a following of, let's say, like 75K, and it was just a more dense 75K of people who like, they really wanted to be there simply for my education rather than simply entertainment, I do think I might choose that.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
So that's like my only caveat of I did a lot right, but I also think you want your audience as dense as possible
Yeah.
as well.
Okay. That definitely makes me feel better. And I'm sure there's people listening because I get this question a lot sometimes. And for people who come to me, they're like, I don't have that many followers on Instagram. Like, am I going to be able to book weddings? I'm like, yeah,
Sure.
because that doesn't matter. But it's
Right.
also good to like hear that from me too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it really doesn't have to be the like the one thing holding you back from the goal that you want. I mean, I know people who they have a very small following and they still are very wildly successful. And I also know people who have a lot more followers than I do and they barely hit multiple six figures. So
Yeah.
it's just like, I don't know, depends what you want.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about your multi-channel marketing framework because I noticed this whenever I was looking at the sales page for your coaching, which your offer is it's the business blueprint, right? That's what you call
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So I'm curious on the multi-channel marketing framework and what you don't have to go all those secrets obviously, but like how does it work? What are you helping people with as far as their marketing? Because I don't know if you touch much on ads, but I'm very interested to see like what you do and how you coach people to start booking more weddings.
Yeah. So basically, the multi channel marketing is it's basically this framework that gives people a structure and a strategy and almost a mathematical approach to their marketing instead of just tell people about what you do, Because I
Yeah.
think that's something that is very difficult to hear when you're trying to grow your business is when everybody's just telling you like you just have to get your name out there more and you're just like, well, okay, but what does that mean? Like what does that actually mean? And so to me, the way I look at things with your entire business, especially in photography, is one of the biggest forms of leverage you have is your demand for your work, which is the rate of inquiries you have versus the number of openings you have.
Mhm.
And so to me, if you have a wild excess of inquiries to dates you have available, you can kind of do anything in your business. Like that leverage point, it kind of secures your win, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense. I mean, there's a lot more that I teach in my program to make you go further than that, like sales and branding and all these types of things. But I do think fundamentally, when someone is like, hey, I have 3 inquiries coming in on average per month, fundamentally, it doesn't matter what I teach you. It doesn't matter what anybody else teaches you in terms of like sales and like use this template or, have this script or use this visual or even making your photos like XYZ good. I'm like, that's too few inquiries to even work with. Like,
Yep.
there's not even enough data to work with. And so this multi-channel marketing framework is basically an approach that teaches people, hey, how can we get you, for most people, it's how can we get you to 5 inquiries per week?
Okay.
Because if you have 5 inquiries per week for like the average person, then at that point, for many photographers, they only have to book like 1 out of 10 inquiries that come. And then they can still hit their goals of, let's say, like 25 bookings in a year for weddings. And so that's really what we teach them how to do, is how to get those 5 inquiries. And then you have to ask yourself, where are those 5 inquiries coming from? So you have to say, this is how many I'm going to get from this place. This is how many I'm going to get from this place. And maybe there's another place. And one of the biggest things we do is you start with 1 and you prove out that 1 to get as many inquiries as you said you needed from that 1 channel.
Smart.
And then once you've done that, then you can head on to another channel and get that other one. So that's kind of like a preview of it without getting like too technical. But again, the core of it is we've got to get more mathematical and more technical with your approach to marketing. And this is mostly organic marketing. I mean, you can throw in paid marketing to this as well, and say, hey, this is how many inquiries I get from this paid channel per whatever. But a lot of it is organic. And so that's really what I want to equip people with. And people have really been helped by that, so that they can actually see, like, this is the goal and this is how I take action steps to actually get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really, really smart, because the number one thing, and I know like my data is a little skewed because of what I offer, but most people come to me and they're like, I have a problem with getting inquiries. Like I just can't get them for some reason.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I know why, but you don't know why, so I'll help you do it. So, but I'm interested because like my thing is very just like, hey, run ads.
Yeah.
But when you go past that, there's so many different marketing channels that you can dive into. And I have my favorites, but I'm really curious on like what you feel like the best marketing channels are and the worst ones.
Oh, this is a good question. My favorite marketing channels, I always recommend to people that they have a digital front and an in-person front.
Okay, interesting.
And the reason being is just because like both are amazing opportunities, right? And so if you're just digital, the problem with digital is that digital oftentimes doesn't go deep. It goes wide, and we'll get to that in a minute, but it doesn't go deep oftentimes. So like if you have, like I tell people, I'm like, one really good in-person connection is to me the equivalent of like 100 more followers on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they actually vouch for you by name, and they can like if someone, think of the last person, like service provider that you, well, let's just give the example of you telling me about a coach that I should hire. Mm-hmm. For me to go to that coach cold is going to be a way harder uphill sell for that coach to sell me than if I come into it knowing you first and you're vouching for that person. Right? Like it's just like so much easier of a sell, because I can fall back on, well, Peyton can vouch for this person. He's worked with this person. He's gone through the whole process and it went well. Right. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's really the power of in-person marketing. And I think also like in-person is just easy for a lot of potential, or not potential, a lot of wedding couples to default back to. Like when they think of how do I find a wedding photographer, it's easy for most people to just default back to, what did my friends do? Yep. Or what did my family do? Or what's the photographer I know who does photography and does a great job of it, right? But then on the other side of things, the in-person front oftentimes doesn't go wide. Mm-hmm. And you can only hit a certain amount of people in a certain amount of radius, right? And so that's why I also say, go digital as well. And so to me, if you can have like a solid, I mean, I do think Instagram for a photographer is your best bet for a digital front. If you can have a solid digital front and a solid in-person front, and to me, like in-person front, I'd say is probably going to be like other vendors. Mm-hmm. Because other vendors are going to just have like a network of people that they already know in that exact space that you want to book in, and specifically vendors who are going to be booking at people at the same price point as you. No point getting in with vendors who are way below your budget. But like people in the same price point as you. To me, I'm like, I think the hybrid of those two, a digital and an in-person, I think, is probably the greatest. And if you want where I think the worst place to market yourself is, I think off the top of my head, I hear photographers telling me all about Wedding Wire and The Knot
Yeah.
and these registries. And I think they are horrible places to market yourself. I think it's probably the worst way for a client to find you. Like the worst way to pre-qualify a lead ever is by someone typing in like a criteria into this terribly designed, terribly built out website, and then it spits your name out. Like to me, I'm just like, oh, like that just doesn't sound. And then the amount that they make you pay for The Knot and Wedding Wire, I always tell people, I'm like, hey, I think you'd be much better off putting your money towards running an ad on Google or Meta, because it truly is. I've never heard good results from those other places, to be honest with you. So
Me either.
That's my tea. Sorry, Wedding Wire and The Knot, but that's just how I feel.
Yeah. That's good. And I've got my own list too, but that one is like,
Ooh, can you tell me your
one.
list? I'm actually really I'm intrigued, especially on the things that you don't like.
Yeah. So that's definitely one of them. So this is, my list differs based on where you're at in the marketplace. So if you're like very, very low priced and you're just trying to get your feet wet, I think doing things like posting in Facebook groups, working with people's budgets, doing giveaways, joining The Knot, that could work. But for the 50% of photographers and filmmakers out there who are charging above like the 3 to 4K range, I think you should definitely not do that. That's some of the worst stuff you could do. Posting in Facebook groups, joining The Knot, and stuff like that. I think vendor relationships are important, but I think that there's a lot of ways people teach it that I don't like. And it's things just like cold DMing people, offering like transactional shoots and stuff like that. I don't like that. I found that in my own business and like with the members of my program, like forming real relationships with people like that, and actually like, you know, like doing stuff like what we're doing now, like podcast for podcast, like helping people and helping their audiences and stuff. I think that goes so much further. Like a lot of people in my program, when they get good at ads, they'll network with planners or whatever and help them run ads and grow their business, and they create a referral loop. So I think there's ways to do it, but overall my top, like, don't do it is like The Knot, or any registry like that that's not specifically designed for somebody who's just like you. Like if there was like a registry that only listed photographers who charge 10K, whatever. But for the most part, don't like them. Running like giveaways and stuff like that, I'm not a big fan of if you're higher priced. And you know, stuff like that, posting in Facebook groups, all that stuff. So yeah, that's my take.
No, I love it. I even think the like kind of what you touched on of where are your people at? If your type of client would not spend time on a website like that, you really have no reason to be there, and it's only going to bring you in just the type of leads that are going to waste your time, and it's probably going to hurt your brand as a whole. So it's like I think people would be very smart to get specific on, hey, where are my people? Like where are they finding their photographers? And if they're not finding their photographer by just typing that name in or typing the criteria in on The Knot, then it's like, don't go there. Like just go where your people hang out.
Yep. This brings up a really interesting question that I get asked a lot, because we both teach branding. So when you tell people like, hey, find out where your people are coming from, I feel like a lot of people in this industry, photographers and filmmakers alike, they think, okay, I am a wedding photographer or I am a wedding filmmaker and I shoot weddings and I charge $3 or $5 grand, and that's where they stop. So where and how do you help people determine how they're different than the competition and more than just a generic wedding photographer or videographer?
Kind of how do they set themselves apart?
Exactly.
I mean, to me, there's multiple ways I think you do this. The first way is every single part of your branding that you put out has to be congruent with each other. Like it can't, like if you say you're a $10,000 photographer every single thing has to look like that. Every single thing has to communicate that. Because if there's ever a hiccup in that, it's like this subconscious message to your client that says you're not who you say. It's like scam. Like it just feels off. And I think there's even like, I don't know, like there's even like subconscious things that you can do. But it's like I was I did a YouTube recently, and I gave the example of if you have a stain on your white shirt, it's immediately
I listened
dirty.
to this.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's just one tiny little stain, but it's immediately considered a dirty shirt. And like, yeah, you don't get thanks for having a white clean shirt. It's just supposed to be that way. And so I think that's something that's probably like first and foremost. Like I tell my students, I'm like, hey, like people who are below your budget, they like shouldn't really have to ask. They should come to your website. They should see your photos, and they should be like, I am in the wrong place. Like there's no way I'm getting out of here for any less than, 5 figures. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what you want people who are below your budget to feel. And that's, again, it's like this idea of like branding congruence. And then I think the other part of it too, and not everybody takes this direction, that's okay. But I think personal branding, if you can become a personal brand as a photographer, to me, that is one of the highest forms of leverage as well, because you can attach your worth and your value to yourself as a human instead of to just everything else. Because to me, I'm like, everybody else can compete with you on price, on photos, on branding, like visually, on your experience level, on whatever it is. But if they make a personal connection with you long before they ever need a photographer, when they need a photographer, you will be the top person in their brain, and they'll get on that Zoom call with you and be like, we already know we want you and we won't have anybody else. To me, that's power. And to me, that's where I see like some really big transformations happen with people in my program, especially because they'll be like, yeah, I get on calls with people now, and they don't even need a whole lot. They're just getting on the call to make sure that everything's like squared away and that it's all chill, but they're not getting on the call to meet me. They already know me. And I think to me, if you can't, again, not everybody takes that route, and I understand that. Some people really like their privacy, or they really like the mysterious side of being an artist, and that's fine. But I think if you can press into that personal side of branding, there's a lot of power in it.
Yeah, it just makes it easier to stand out, because like
Totally.
you said, like it's so hard to compete on quality of your work alone, because
It is.
everybody is so talented.
Yep, exactly. Like there's dime a dozen out there for beautiful photos. Like, sorry, it's just the way, which is cool. Honestly, it's just the fact is you also have to figure out some other way to stand out, because that can't be your differentiating factor anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And like unique branding is great, and I push it a lot in my program. But it only goes so far. So like when you can really lean into your personality and your like humanity, and you can get your face out there more and more and more, I feel like that's almost like a cheat code.
Yep.
To just establish trust. Because like a big thing that I run into sometimes with my members and people who don't join our program, they're like, yeah, I'm posting, or I'm ranked on Google, or I'm running ads or whatever, but like I just can't get anybody to inquire. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so you have good work, you've got decent branding, you've got the marketing channels in, but are you actually giving people a reason to talk to you?
Huh. That's so good. Yeah.
It's a very hard question to answer.
Right. Exactly. Like, is there, yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. Because like think about how much trust goes into hiring a creative for your wedding. Like you ideally only get married once. So like you ideally only hire one photographer or videographer.
Right.
So like that is such a hard choice. And I think a lot of people kind of lose that because we do so many.
Well, and I think it's a very highly personal choice.
Yeah.
And, when you're having all these, I always tell people like, hey, if you have not ever gotten in front of the camera before, or if you haven't gotten in front of the camera in a while, like hire somebody and if there's like some personal life event that you have going on, it is such a privilege to have that experience in front of the camera, to realize like, oh, it's vulnerable. And if you like you look at the reasons why you chose that person, and it's so telling because you may have all these things in your head of like, oh, I just want the editing style to be a certain way. And like, I just want to make sure that they have like a certain amount of experience level and da da da, which is also important. But then too, it's like, yeah, but you have to be really okay with that person, like watching you cry in front of the camera. You have to be
Hmm.
okay with that person, like watching you and your partner make out. I mean, you have to be okay with that person opening up these, being there for some really, really personal live moments of your life. I mean, that, that doesn't just, someone doesn't just pick that type of a person because, oh, they had pretty photos. Like there's has to be some sort of connection point there, or people just won't feel comfortable with you.
Exactly. I'm sure you've experienced this, but like every time I post something personal, like a picture of me or a picture of me and Caitlin, it always does way better numbers,
Yeah.
likes, comments, engagements than like
Hmm.
any work, like portfolio or educational material I
Right.
ever put out.
It's true. Yep. I definitely notice a lot of that as well.
Yeah. So
People, I mean, people want to connect with people rather
exactly,
than a business.
exactly. I
And
tell
so,
I tell my people, like, you guys, you're not Apple, you're not Tesla. People aren't going to follow you if you're a faceless brand,
yeah.
and it's going to be very, very hard to do that. And I have people in my program who are studio brands; they don't have a face and they do well, but it's harder for them.
Well, and I don't know if you've probably noticed this, but photography specifically is very different in many ways than the majority of brands we come into contact with.
Hmm.
And so whenever people start to go down the route of like, well, this brand does this, and so I'm going to transfer that idea to my brand, I'm always like, okay, but be careful with that because I mean, they're selling something that's very, very different than what
Yep.
you're selling. Like I told you that I loved Donald Miller's Story Brand book, and I love that book. I think that book is very, very important for photographers to read, for everybody to read. But I do think there are some differences that I would have specifically for photographers when they're reading that book. Like the first being, he tells you never to talk about yourself.
Hmm.
He's like, no one cares about what you have to say because you're not the hero of your brand. And I'd say, yes, in many senses, don't make it all about yourself. But I believe you need to share a bit about yourself, and you need to show people who you really are so that they can actually trust you. Like I'm like, I don't expect people to tell me about their story and to open up about their personal details and their personal story until I do that first. And so that's why, especially when I was a photographer, I did this a lot. I would open up a lot about like my relationship with my wife or fiance at the time or girlfriend at the time.
Hmm.
And it was like people would message me in their inquiries and tell me like, yeah, you and your relationship with your wife is actually what made us reach out because we related to you so much and we found a lot of similarity in just your values and like whatever have you, or my personal faith, same story. And so it's like you still have to realize that your service being such a personal service is very different than Apple selling
Yep.
a product that has no personality to it, really. I mean, Apple has personality, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think it's important to note too, like, because I also part of what I teach in branding is based on Miller's book, and like using the SB7 framework and all that stuff. And what I like to tell people is, the hero should be your ideal client, but then they need to know who the guide is.
Yeah.
If you're going to step in as a guide, you can't be like a faceless figure that people don't trust, because you're
Yep.
not going to be able to lead them to the promised land or whatever if
Yep.
you're not actually showing up and giving them like knowledge on who you are.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
yeah,
We we need to it's all about Luke Skywalker, but you got to get to know Obi-Wan.
yeah, exactly. So I have two more questions to ask. They're very tactical, and then we can cut it because I know we're like going on an hour and 15 minutes. But
Love it.
so the tactical question is, you mentioned in your favorite marketing channels, referrals, well, just in-person marketing, really creating relationships with vendors, clients, and all that stuff, and
Hmm.
then social media, Instagram
Hmm.
focused. What do you feel like are the biggest mistakes that people make when they try to go those two routes? Because those are very popular routes for good reason, but I feel like a lot of people do them wrong.
I feel like my head is going bonkers with the mistakes for social media. So I'll like wait. I can tell you what the biggest mistake is for in-person marketing, and you touched on it already a little bit, but I think it's treating in-person relationships very means to an end esque or just transactional, because you can't do that, unfortunately. Like, you have to be a person to build a personal relationship. And so I think a lot of times, like you said, there's a lot of people who really like to hack their way to a vendor connection or a vendor referral or whatever. And it's like, you can't do that. You have to, I mean, even like my biggest tip to people when they want to build a relationship is I'm like, get your physical body in the same space as another person. I don't know how you do that. I don't know where you do that, but that's how you build a relationship with someone. Like a DM is like, it's just oftentimes not enough. And so like get your physical body in with somebody else, like shake their hand or look them in the eye. So I think when people, again, try to take this paper thin approach to those personal relationships, it's probably your biggest mistake right there.
Yeah.
For social media, there's so many.
There's a lot.
I don't know where to grab. I mean, I think probably the biggest one that I see touches on what we were just talking about is people who really, and I think artists have this a lot of the time, they just try to hide behind their work and they hide behind their, like, this mysterious artistry. When I think it would be the biggest advantage that they have to put their face forward in their content and to be a human rather than just somebody who's like, you know, just this lifeless Instagram account that people can't really connect with. It's just, oh, pretty photo, cool, but I don't actually know who you are behind it. So I'd say that's probably, if I were to give like the number one thing that A, people tell me they struggle with, and B, I don't see a lot out there, that's probably it. I mean, if I had $1 for every, this sounds so sad, but like if I had $1 for every time that I go to somebody's profile and I can't find a first name. Like I cannot find a first name.
Yep.
I can't find a face. And I'm just, I mean, sometimes I'll even go to people's website and I will try to find an about page. I still can't find anything. It's just like Pampas Grass LLC, inquire here. And I'm just like seriously, like you're losing your biggest asset, which is you. And so I think that's probably the biggest mistake I see.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And I agree a lot with that. As a coach, it's very infuriating if I can't like say hello first name.
I know, like I always want to call people by name.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what your name is.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. More of the story for everyone listening is if you're running social media as a serious marketing channel, get your face out there, make content people actually want to consume. And that requires research and testing, and do more than you think you need to do. I think that sums it up.
Yep.
Cool. So personal question, then we'll end. What are your biggest goals right now, if you're willing to share?
In all of life or just in
in
business?
general, whatever comes to your head.
Interesting. I think my goals right now are very different than what they used to be, because I think my goals used to be very growth oriented in terms of like, I don't know, like bigger. And I actually don't think that's where I'm at right now. I think my bigger goals are longevity rather than just growing quickly or at a certain rate or at a certain period of time. So I'd say longevity is a huge goal for me. Longevity and consistency. Because I like, the best way I can put this without being like, I don't know. I feel very, I don't know how to say this, but I'm kind of like, I feel like in life right now, I feel very like, okay, I've hit some goals that I've really wanted to hit, and I am not trying to step 10 steps ahead anymore. To me, my goal is I'd really like to keep hitting the goals I've been hitting, and go deeper in life with other things that aren't specifically business related. Like, just transparently, I think my relationships, personal relationships, have been put on the back burner for the past like 3 years of my life.
I understand.
And not my wife. Like, my wife is like, we're always close, but you live with that person. And so it is in many ways easier sometimes. And I think for me, I've gotten to this point where I'm like, personal relationships are very important to me. And I can just honestly say I haven't prioritized them as much as I should.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like a huge goal for me as well, is deeper personal relationships. And last one would be health, getting healthier. And especially, like, I'm 30 this year. And so it's like, I mean, if you don't feel good, there's no point to really anything else. You know what I'm saying? So like, I want to be, and I believe I am healthy, but I think I want to be healthy and continue to be healthy and get healthier. So yeah, those are my goals.
I love it. Lifelong sustainability.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
Yeah. So Gary V, he mentioned, I'm probably going to butcher it, but he does like 15 or 30 minutes every day where he just picks one person in his life. He just reaches out to them and he's just like, hey, thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. And that helps him so much.
Like a phone call?
Phone call, text, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
I thought about doing that too, because it was in my head this morning, weirdly enough. Because I felt the same. Like, my relationship with like my obviously my girlfriend is amazing, and we have like a couple close friends, but I would really love to nurture more relationships that have kind of fallen behind. So
yeah. And it's hard too, because those types of things, like, especially those of us who we have a lot of things we can look at success wise in our businesses. We're kind of like, how do I I don't know, like, how do I not hack our way there, but like, how do I like figure this out? Kind of like
you're always like determined to solve something.
Yeah, exactly. But but personal relationships aren't that straightforward. It's like, it's different. You can't fully strategize your way there. Like, you have to come, I don't know. It's really weird, but it's such an important part of, we all know it's an important part of life. And I know the more that we press into it, the happier we are and the more rich life is. And so it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, Nathan, it's been amazing talking to you.
Thanks, man.
I
You
feel
too.
like I don't need to ask the question of where people can find you, because more than 300 of people who I follow you. So that's fun.
Wow.
But I would love for people just to know where they can find you and learn more about what you do, how you help people, and all that.
Yeah, so I'd say the best places to hang out are follow my podcast, which is called Passion with Purpose. We talk a lot about these types of conversations over there. And my Instagram is @NathanChanski. So I just start there.
Love it. Love it. And yeah, the podcast is amazing. I listen to it probably once or twice a week.
Dude,
really
seriously?
Yeah.
That means so much. I appreciate that.
When you were talking about the stain on the shirt, I was like, I just listened to that.
Jeez, I appreciate that. That means the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on, man. I'll go ahead and stop it. But yeah, for everybody listening, thank you for listening and watching if you're on YouTube for the last hour and 20 minutes. Go follow Nathan. He's amazing and he's smart and knows what he's talking about. And he's helped a lot of people grow. The testimonials on your course page are insane. So
thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Love it. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.